the growth is going to be exponential. It's going to be exponential, especially when it becomes a liberating machine, right? One where we have the tools to create a parallel system that people can finally opt out of the dreary 9-to-5 life, when people can actually opt out and say, no, I have another thing to go to. I have another safe place to exist, and have my needs met.
The old world is ending.
And we have the opportunity to rethink everything.
This is a show about the systemic problems in our world.
And the real solutions we have today.
To transition from an apocalyptic storm of war, scarcity, and ecological collapse.
To create an abundantly advanced, collaborative society.
That sustains all life.
You may think it's an impossible dream.
But the alternative is an inevitable nightmare.
We're your hosts, Matt Holton,
Amanda Smith,
and Zachary Marlowe.
And together,
we can move past this economic absurdity
and come together to actualize our collective potential.
To create something completely new.
We are
Moneyless Society.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is a little bit of a change of pace today. I'll be hosting the show with Amanda, our other beloved co-host and co-founder of Moneyless Society. My name's Ev. I am the internal coordinator for our media and messaging circle, and we're kind of changing things up a little bit with the show these days. We're trying to introduce you guys more to like Moneyless Society beyond the podcast. Like, what are we actually doing outside of that? So we're going to be doing more episodes where we bring in like other members from other volunteers from Moneyless Society and talking about how things work, what we're doing. And for today, we wanted to introduce you to a little bit of our structure, sociocracy, and some of the people who have been participating in that. So, like I said, we have Amanda. We also have Nathan Jones and Lavra, who are both longtime volunteers and parts of our general circle. So how is everybody doing today?
Not bad.
Great.
Feeling good.
Hello. I'm so glad to be here in this room with all of you and for the world to get to see, presumably the world to get to see the faces and the personalities and the energy behind what MoSo is and what we've been working on and achieving for years now.
Yeah, multiple years. Yeah, it's crazy to think. I mean, I've only been involved for, I think, like a year and a half, almost 2, but I know you guys have been at it for a while. And let's start by just kind of like getting that from each of you. So like, how you originally found MoSo, how long you've been involved, what you're involved in now. So let's start with Lavra.
I was going to help clean up some links on the website after basically looking around for a place to publish an article about why we shouldn't need to pay to be alive. And Moneyless Society, like, I saw the website and I started looking through the content and it vibed, it matched everything I was trying to do, but in a way that was like the right kind of ideologically flexible. So, really like tied to certain core tenets, but like not picky about the stuff that's sort of after the fact and like less important, and just more personal. So I helped out with the website and onboarded to be a volunteer to do more, and basically just kept ramping up my involvement. As I noticed things were happening, I like tried to make them happen faster and better and easier, and that led me to develop a lot of the tech tools that MoSo uses and find people who like making more. So I've been kind of, sort of doing some like technical stuff in the background and being at meetings to keep people in the loop and get in the loop. But lately it's been kind of, I'm watching the next generation take up the mantle and do their thing. Like I'm watching someone in the Technomancy circle, they're like doing basically the level of development that I was in like a totally different direction. And, I can only imagine what it's going to turn into. So it's been already a very long, like windy journey. And I'm sure that it's going to get twice as much so as it gets to be like, we're doing bigger stuff, which it feels like.
even windier. Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the cool things I learned early on about the technomancy circle is it's not just IT. It's like it is envisioning how technology takes us through the transition. How it assists us getting there. So Lavra's been huge in leading that, innovating there. Getting us in spaces that help our work move along more smoothly. So super duper appreciated. Nathan, let's introduce you, my friend.
Yeah. Let's see. I think I've been volunteering for like 2.5 years now, maybe more. I don't know. There was no anniversary date, but yeah, I really got involved right when COVID happened, and I just saw how fucked up the world was, and specifically, like, I was really, really blown away by the fact that everybody just got stipends and were like paid to exist, and I was like, hold on a second, like we're propping up this structure artificially, and that was a really, really big awakening for me. And I had been seeing the memes, the hot memes fresh off the press, and just seeing that the org was really really aligned and was speaking to a lot of the concerns that I was seeing and feeling and everything like that. And then there was like a call to like, hey, let's get some volunteers, let's get people involved. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. And hopped on a call and kind of started getting to know everybody, dipping my feet and everything like that. And I was just kind of interested, trying to get to know people, trying to find comfort in sort of like an online community and everything like that. And it wasn't until about a year and a half, no, maybe 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I actually got arrested for the cultivation and alleged distribution of psilocybin mushrooms. And like when I was actually in jail, like experiencing that whole fiasco and just the frustration of the punitive system, I actually remember feeling very powerfully like, okay, this can either break me or this can like push me forward. And the thing that motivated me was thinking like, I want to push forward more in Moneyless Society, because I saw how like it was the epicenter of all of these other problems that I was experiencing and witnessing and things like that. And so I feel like it was after that moment that I really, really got interested in pushing forward for getting us organized via sociocracy. Because before that, we had decided, we'd like talked about it and been like, yeah, let's like actually use sociocracy. This is going to be interesting. And it wasn't until after that point when I was like, no, let's activate this shit. Let's make it happen. That I felt like I was the most activated and ready to make things happen. And I guess the rest will be history, right?
It's the whole let it radicalize you rather than lead you to despair, right? In motion.
Love that. Yes,
exactly.
yes. History in the making. What a wonderful note to end on. And speaking to your all's involvement, it's so important to highlight how the decentralization of operations has been at the center of the momentum that Moneyless Society has been able to build and keep because of volunteers like yourselves, Lavra and Nathan. Skills were brought to the table, energy was brought to the table, a sheer force to make this thing happen entered into our spaces. And with parameters and autonomy, you all were able to build from there. And here we are today to talk about that with our audience and community.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, obviously we've met you a little bit on the Kentucky retreat episode we did a little while back, but I was hoping you could speak a little bit to like basically how Moneyless Society, just briefly, like, is trying to utilize the things that we talk about to build some examples, to build some alternatives. The goal of decentralized power. What are we hoping to do there?
Well, obviously, to empower those who have been disempowered and disenfranchised by the effects of systemic failure set forth by design of the system that we're all a slave to. So we empower people who are disempowered by reminding them that they are inherently A, worthy, and B, capable of playing a role in their own lives and the lives of their community. And we do that through putting the tools they need to be participatory participatory in that way in their hands. And those tools take on many shapes and forms. It can be, dissemination of relevant material, education in the way of revolution or systemic issues or interpersonal interactions, you name it. There's a plethora of tools from one end of the spectrum to the other. It can be funds, actually, even though we're called Moneyless Society. It can be funds to help people start up initiatives and programs that simply feed and house people to keep our heads above water so that we can have the dignity we need to carry forward with the vision that we have for a better future. And Moneyless Society makes that happen by, again, just starting with helping people realize that they're able and they're worthy. And it really just comes down to like that whole removing that mystifying curtain of why there is a hierarchy. And again, just letting people know that we are each other's most valuable resource, which is something that I repeat without shame any chance I get, because that's the thing, that's the concept that's been obscured from us probably the most through having to pay to interact with people and receive services and get goods. We forget that we are a resource to each other. We just think that there's a paywall and that's it. Like, that's all we need to interact with is a paywall. And we forget that through interacting with each other, we uncover a gold mine of resources and sustainability. It was evident in what Lavra was sharing about how now they get to sit back to some degree, though still very involved and busy, and watch the people that they brought in take onus of the projects and where they go from there, because they empowered those people with the tools to do that for themselves and for the broader community. One concrete example would be ACM, the Appalachian Community Meal and Mutual Aid Project, which I started here in Berea, Kentucky. For the past year and a half, roughly, we've been helping people on the ground to remember what I said, that they are each other's most valuable resource, that they have the ability to be involved in decisions that affect their own lives and the lives of the community that they live in. And we do that by providing barrier-free resources, barrier-free access to life's most basic but essential needs like housing and food and inclusion and at all, so that they can get their heads above water, start to heal, start to gain clarity, recharge, build strength, and go out there and make an impact of their own. And, in that loop, we create a feedback. We create a reinforcing cycle of good, if you will, to be most general about it.
I think barrier-free is something most of us can't fathom, like not having to pay up or, just being given what you need is such an unimaginable concept for so many people. And I think what you were saying about that, that involvement, that trust and that autonomy is all something we never experience. And I think that's a good transition into introducing a little bit of how we do things differently here, because we're pretty much used to hierarchy in every part of our lives, in politics, at work, in the household, in families. Like, we are just we just take hierarchy for granted. Somebody has to be the leader and tell everyone else what to do. And, so sociocracy works very differently. And I was hoping, Nathan, since you started to introduce that and you were saying that you felt that it was important to implement it in MoSo, could you give like a brief, beginner, sociocracy for dummies kind of intro for how that even works?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So, I mean, one of the reasons that we really decided to use sociocracy is because it was such a marked, deviation from the hierarchical structure. It is significantly less hierarchical, and it's developed under the concept of dynamic governance, or I best understand it as consensus-based governance, right? So the way that policies and proposals actually happen is if you get consensus. And then, most people are like, well, the problem with consensus is if you have 100,000 people and you're trying to get everybody to agree, how do you get things done? So the way that sociocracy manages that is by deciding who decides. And then the dynamic basis of that governance is the constant feedback loops that help inform the rest of the system. And so it separates into circles that are semi-autonomous and that are tasks with specific, they call them aims and domains. And it's really just the things that your space is responsible for doing. And then you have that circle, that space has the authority to make decisions over that space, but they must do it with consensus. So, and then the way that it is semi-autonomous, or that it is integrated with the rest of the system, is through, they call them double linking roles, where you have like representatives from other circles being in these discussions, in these consensus-based meetings, so that their circles have to have some form of consent in order to, accept and move forward with these proposals. And I think my favorite thing about sociocracy is just the fluidity of all of that, especially the concept of consent, because safe enough to try is how they define consent. And that is such a freeing definition for me, because there's times where I'm like, I don't like this proposal. This is something that I don't really think we should do, but everybody else is talking about it. I'm hearing a lot of good points, and I'm like, you know what? This is safe enough to try. And that's where that dynamic basis comes in, because we can try it, we can implement it, and then we can come back later and say, okay, that was a fuck up. Or we can be like, actually, I was totally wrong. This is great. I'm seeing a lot of things. We can tweak this here and there. And it's just a really fluid way to move forward. And it really balances the issues that we see in terms of like having a top-down hierarchy, where somebody who is at the top of the pyramid, who has no idea how the actual work is being done, but simply wants to see results, is going through and forcing everybody to comply with whatever it is they want, instead of getting consensus. And the structure is set up in such a way that it is necessary for it. And I wanted to provide a little bit of context on just like why we decided to use that. As I mentioned, it was a marked difference from being hierarchical, but at the same time, we really wanted to ensure that when we are making decisions that affect people, those people are involved in the decisions. That was a very, very important part of it, right? Like, we didn't want anyone who's needing to do the actual labor being forced into doing something that they don't understand why, or have no actual clarification on what needed to be done in the first place, or what results were trying to be achieved. So I hope that's a good enough overview, because obviously we could dig into it for hours.
I think doing an episode or 3 on it, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. One other thing I just wanted to say is that we realized that we needed a way to structure the organization, right? We've been focusing so heavily on organizing lately. That's been a lot of our labor right now, is getting ourselves organized so that we can start achieving our goals. And I feel really confident that we're getting to the point where it's like we're choosing projects and we're saying let's do them, because we feel confident with the structure we've put up.
There's a lot to be said for that level of confidence in the structure itself. But again, another rabbit hole. The fact that we've arrived at a point where we can confidently say, okay, let's take this on. We believe with all the work we've already done that we can see it through to an effective end. That's kind of a big achievement because of, the learning journey that we've all been through and been down together. You pretty much reiterated what I was going to say when I put my hand up. I always think of what I wanted to say or should have said after the fact. And in my response to Ev, I didn't feel that I fully clarified what we're doing at MoSo and how in the way of decentralizing power per se. And I think that you did explain it very well, Nathan. It's essentially distributing the tools and the onus and the autonomy evenly, horizontally structured, basically, to a great degree, so that everyone gets to have that participation insofar as they are informed and capable. And no longer then is the power and the tools condensed into a few hands or one person's hands, through which creates a bottleneck and nothing can happen. And while we do have to be very careful about the pace at which we approach things and try to achieve things, I think we'd all agree that we would see better and quicker results all across the board of our socioeconomic environment if people were doing this like open source type collaboration that we're essentially executing here.
Yeah, it makes me think, Lavra, I would love to hear more about what you were saying about like how the, efficiency grows as, one person isn't required to do all of the work. I mean, that's what has your experience been with sociocracy so far? And how have you seen, that ability for people to take initiative and get involved and like do work in the way that they see fit?
Yeah, you're touching on a special interest of mine, which, so I guess because of that, I'll zoom out. So it's like you can imagine, I've been like watching this planet like enter the solar system of sociocracy and sort of do an orbit, and there's interactions there. But what I spent my time on before MoSo was figuring out how do we make like a system that lets people do asynchronous work, that lets them do small chunks, and like really makes the most of what we have, which are people who are tired, people who are poor, and people who have time maybe, but not a lot. So how do we make the most of that little bit of time? And so the way I think about all of these different actions that we do is like their format and how they happen, like what causes them to happen, and then how are they how is accountability done for them, and how do we tie those different little tasks into the big picture. So sociocracy offers a lot of tools in that regard, because it basically has like some standards for process, like how do you bring people together in a meeting, how do you assign or delegate accountability, self-delegate in a group for doing things like keeping on top of who's doing what, like the internal coordinator, or how do you make sure that all of it gets like recorded so that we have the scribe. And a lot of the tools that we're trying to set up, we're trying to hybridize with that. We're trying to really meld it so that the structure of the organization flows together with the structure of our tools. So I'll pause there and let you kind of. Did I answer the question, or
yeah?
I should say.
No, I think that's all really insightful, because the like Nathan was saying, we did need some kind of structure. Like there's so much of an idea of like, oh, go do it, do the activism, go do the thing. But it's like, yeah, but to what degree? I mean, I can go plant some plants, but like if we're not building something bigger, then we're not going to be effective on like a large scale. And I think another thing I wanted to kind of hear from you was you had started to talk about how like as like the next generation comes in, you don't feel like you're now required to do everything. So with how is, I guess, people have been hesitant about that. They've come in and been like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, well, here's what we have. What interests you? So like, what is that like?
Yeah. So the way I see it, and I have like strong feelings about like the state of things right now, which is that, we're in a learning period, or an adopting period, and I'm seeing some like friction that I'm going to attribute to like a few things. Like I can't blame any one thing, any force or person, but it does seem like there's too much on the table, and like what we need help with is like refining, like, okay, how do we take all of this mess of stuff and like cohere it into some long-term plans, and like how do we figure out where each person fits best. So like personally, like I want to set I am motivated to set up a system where people can jump in and like just filter by their own criteria. So like have their own like, I have this skill set, I have these hobbies, and whatever it actually looks like, they would plug in their like preference data and then get like, okay, this is the number one thing to do. So that's something I'm trying to code. I'm trying to make like a project management app that is basically part of Magnova, but I want to have a separate version where it's like personally digging through those like energies that people can have, the different forms of energy that a person can have, and their priorities, and like, basically coming up with ways to link data. So to me, like the efficiency comes when we can make it clear like what the priorities of the organization are, like going from big zoomed out picture to really fine detail zoomed in, and have like a chunking, and have a like collaborative decision about like what matters. So basically having ways for the groups to say these are our priorities, and having a way for like the organization to onboard people a little bit more, not just get them into the space, but to highlight, like, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what the circle is doing. This is what in the circle they're choosing to do with that general mission and or those aims and domains, to use sociocracy terms. And there's going to be, like, I think our next jump in efficiency will come with that hand-holding, with that, like, bring people in a meaningful way. Because we have a lot of work, but everyone's like, well, what's first? And if they don't know, even if they know, like, what's first, it's still like, okay, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know if I'm allowed to or supposed to do that. Like, when's someone going to jump in? So basically, coming up with the culture, I think, is what Moneyless Society is figuring out. I think that's one of the big, like, societal scale things that we're doing, which is rebuilding that culture of people wanting to help out and, like, finding the things, actually searching for the things that are for them to do as decided by them.
Love that. I love that you touched on Magnova, because that's why I wanted to jump in and say, hey, that sounds like Magnova. We must go down that rabbit hole ASAP, if not in this episode, very, very soon. We've done one on it, by the way, for listeners and watchers out there. Look back through our other videos. But it would not hurt to repeat. And then in response to what Ev asked, I think it's helpful and important also to point out, in regards to you not having Lavra to do all the work yourself any longer, because of the nature of this culture that we're working to cultivate, and just, like, the benefits of it are we get to. The system would term it pass the buck, but what we see it as, and what it really is, again, is work in this open source way, this truly collaborative way. So everyone who becomes involved gets to pick up a piece of the puzzle and work on it themselves, versus you, in the technomancy space per se, having to wear the heavy crown of leadership in that space. So I think that is just one of the most important perks to talk about when it comes to how we're operating and building out these anti-system systems, if you will. We are focusing largely on being sure that not only are the tasks efficient in the sense that everyone has a little piece of the puzzle to work on, but there is no top-down structure insofar that it prevents people from being able to make decisions and, gain that exponential ground on improvements and enhancements of the things that we're trying to do, because there's nobody there to say you can or can't, outside of, whatever shared values and ethics that we've consented to abiding by for the greater good.
Yeah. That's probably a good thing to get into at some point too, is our shared values and stuff. But Nathan, I know you had something to say.
Yeah. One of the things that I love that Lavra pointed out is just that even though we've organized our governance structure and we've been working tirelessly on getting that set up, like there's still friction, there's still issues, there's still things that we're having to fix, because I think one of the, like, a personal revelation that I've had is just that governance is one piece of a new society, right? And even though it's a big one that a lot of us were really interested to explore and understand, sociocracy as a governance tool is just a tool, is just a single system in a society, in an ecosystem of tools. And so we're like, it's fun to be at this spot where we're expanding outward. And what I love about what Lavra described and what they're working on specifically is just like, building the tools for people to be able to hop in and filter in, like, oh, okay, these are the things that I can do. These are the things I'm interested in. And, oh, here's exactly where I can plug in. There are the projects that I can work on and things like that. Because I think that as we've been going along through this journey of setting up the governance structure of this org, all of us are very systems minded. It's what drew us to a Moneyless Society. And that means that we have a very high level, big picture view at all times. And we can almost, like, see the vision. We can almost see the end point where it's like, yes, it's this beautiful society where you don't need like you can hop in and help wherever you want. And you have a system that's set up so that you can make sure that no one is becoming a, tyrannical leader or hierarchical dictator or whatever. but then we're still mired in the existing structures, the existing assumptions and cultural programmings and things like that. And we're still figuring it out. But what I love is just that working with this group of people, we are minded and focused on the end goal, and like the ability that Lavra was describing, to be able for them to step away from spending all their time making governance documents and sitting there like organizing our Google Drive and stuff like that. Like that ability is what is finally coming to fruition, where Lavra can do the thing that they're trying to build, which is like, how do people plug into the things that they're genuinely interested and good at doing? And seeing that progress is just like really, really promising, and something I just wanted to highlight again.
Yeah.
Might I piggyback off that real quick?
Of course.
And what you were saying there, Nathan, it sounded like you were describing to some degree contributionism or contributism. I'm not even sure what the ism is. There's so many isms out there. And this, I swear, is not an intentional shameless plug, but it reminds me of the update that I wrote yesterday on my Ko-Fi, and it's all about contributionism. And so essentially, everything, it seems that we will not be able to reach this visionary goal that we all share to a great degree unless we're all working in synergy, toward this goal. And so the more people, the merrier, the more projects happening, the merrier, and so on and so forth. But like Lavra touched on, it does create a bit of chaos and makes it hard to like hone in on what to do and how to do it. But with these tools that they are able to make come to fruition because of how we've been operating thus far, and thus them having the ability and the time to work on them, we reach a place where the level of contribution becomes greater than the level of extraction. I think that might be one of the milestones that we're looking for when, Nathan, you say that there seems to be this point in our heads where we envision that we've made it. Like, okay, this is it. This is the community that we wanted to build. And for me, at least, I think it's all about contribution, being able to contribute, that being accessible to people, such as Lavra's describing they are making a utility for. And yeah, I don't know. That's a word in my head and on my tongue a lot lately, is like, how do we contribute? How do we access the ability to contribute, and so on and so forth? And building that culture of contribution is everything. There's a fine line between it and volunteerism. And I think that's worth exploring sometime.
Yeah. Yeah, I think something that a few of you have said that keeps standing out to me is the idea that like everybody has an interest that is valuable. Everyone has a skill that is valuable. And, you would be surprised like how many people come in or like join our chats or our channels or they onboard to volunteer and they don't think that their skills are useful. They don't think they know anything. They're like, I don't have any useful skills. It's like, well, do you know how to do an Excel doc? Do you know how to like I don't know, talk to people? Because like these are all things that are needed. And one of the cool things about our varied circles is that they all do have such differing skill sets, and people can come in and contribute, like Amanda is saying. And they want to, is the other thing that we find so much, is that it's so rewarding to come here and find that you are useful, because I think a lot of times in daily life, like we feel like we're only useful insofar as like we can get all of our to-dos done for our day job, or like, we can make enough money or that kind of thing. And none of that is like an intrinsic value for us. But I think that is one of the experiences that we're having at Moneyless Society and through sociocracy and contributionism is like our intrinsic values are valuable here. And so like you get to kind of do the things you love and be helping in that way. And I think that's so vastly different from what we experience outside of here. It is funny, though, that so much of our time implementing sociocracy has been spent, in kind of building that infrastructure, which can be really boring. And it's funny because, like, Nathan was saying how like we have this grand vision, and I think a lot of times it can be, difficult for people to like get into the weeds and see how that's going to lead to anything more than just more like bureaucracy, So. How has that felt for you guys? I mean, I think we officially implemented sociocracy, like how long ago was that, Nathan? Like that we've kind of fully kicked it in.
I mean, we've had, I want to say, almost 40 general circle meetings, and we only started moving to bi-weekly beginning of this, or no, like halfway through this year. So I think it's been a full year and a half of full send. Like we've just been like implementing it. Like we created the general circle to operationalize the aims and domains that we outlined that are meant to fulfill the mission. So yeah, I feel like about a year and a half.
Yeah,
and I will point out too that like our pace as an organization is slow. Our pace as an organization is much slower because we are all volunteer based. I think I want to say the max commitment that people can give is like 15 to 20 hours per week.
Yeah.
And that's not the norm, I will say, because most people are still churning through the meat grinder, right? They're still stuck in the day to day, trying to earn a paycheck to exist. So we are stuck on a little bit of a slower timeline, but still in a year and a half, I feel like we have accomplished a lot, and having those foundations and structures in place is really valuable.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, that time has definitely been challenging, but we've already seen so much progress in that, you know, and just in the ways that like the circles function and the meetings function and, you know, and the work function and everything. But I think essentially this might be a good time to kind of like give an overview, because with this episode, we're wanting to introduce people to the general circle, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a general, you know, kind of amalgamation of all the different things we're focusing on. So, I don't know if Lavra or Nathan, one of you wants to give a breakdown of what the other circles are and how General Circle like relates to them.
I'd be happy to kind of just go through the resources that we have. So if you want to see our circles, I mean, that could change between now and the time that people are listening to this. So if they want to see what we got going on, you know, we have like a main document describing the aims and domains of all the circles. And you can find that by going to hub.moneylesssociety.com, and that's 3 S's in a row. So hub.moneylesssociety.com/circles, and that will take you to a list of all our circles with the email addresses that you can use to get in touch with them. And you know, to an extent, you probably can't see much as like a non-MoSo person, but there's also like our folders on Google Drive and the aims and domains and the process roles. So that gives like a huge overview. And going through that, I can tell you we have, there's like the 2 sociocracy core circles, which are the mission circle and the general circle, which, you know, are special mainly because of like the way they, you know, branch. Most circles branch as whenever they want, essentially whenever they, you know, it's time. And so you have a tree, like a, you know, like a graph that, a node graph where it starts with the general circle and branches outward. But the mission circle has a special relationship to the general circle and the overall org because it's basically the board of directors. So whereas general circle is like the beginning of what you would call staff of the MPO, the mission circle is like the non-staff or the board. And in our case, we have a working board. We always had a small membership when we started making sociocracy. So it was like, well, yeah, we're the board and we're the mission circle. And, you know, we're also doing everything in the org. So, you know, we've talked about maybe moving that to a more traditional, like, okay, they're experts outside the org in the mission circle. But for now, it's, you know, members, and we're working on the fine details there. But they define the mission, obviously enough, for the organization. And then as officially the board of directors, they have to basically sign off on certain things. Like, you know, the bylaws, for instance. Now, the general circle, the group that we're talking about today, is the one that coordinates and delegates. So we take the general mission of Moneyless Society, and at the beginning of the general circle's existence, it came up with a list of aims and domains for circles to have. And then it designated what circles would carry out those aims and hold those domains. So once that was done, we've evolved it a little bit. And right now we have the branching off from the general circle. There's the people circle, which is not the most descriptive name, which we're talking about lately, but it essentially looks out for people at MoSo. It's you can think HR responsibilities kind of fall into people circle. And then in general, it kind of like does event, it coordinates like the mediation processes, and it was like the parent circle of onboarding, which is another circle. Kind of, it's like a hybrid circle right now.
It's all very fluid.
Yeah. So then after people circle, there's the admin circle, which is like MPO compliance and organizing the workspaces, finances. And that's a parent circle of the grants and fundraising circle, which is actually very active, especially for kind of getting like grant proposals written for Appalachian Community Meal Project, which Amanda could say a lot about. You're very present in that space. And there are a few other people who are very present in that space too, which is just so fun. And then we have the media and messaging circle. Ev, you'd be able to speak about that. That is, supporting the podcast and the various social media we have, among anything else you're doing in there. And then the direct action circle, we changed that name from direct action and community development just to make it less of a mouthful. And that is like currently being, established. Their point is to think, what direct action can people at MoSo do? So what are our priorities for that? Like, what are projects we can get off the ground and like do as team building exercises? And I don't know if anyone here is super present in that sphere right now, but it's happening, and that's like a lot of people are very passionate about it. And it's the hesitation in it being a full-fledged, action-packed circle is just like cohering that vision and cohering like the priorities people have. So it's similar to the Technomenti circle, where we have like all these ideas, but we're not sure like what to do first, and everyone like wants to do certain things, but we're not sure how it fits together. So we're, in that phase of like, we now have some structure, but what do we do with it? So that loops in the Technomenti circle, which is all about making new ways to interact with technology that are more humanistic and more just like friendly and conducive to the world that we want to live in. And we test it here. We're making things for our org, and also making things that could be just open source expanded into like a general public website. So, where we talked about making a web app to help with onboarding, and like the way I've been thinking about the whole project is, how do I make this in a way that like we started off just MoSo, and then just like a few tweaks, it could become a website for anyone. So that's kind of how we're going about things there. Thinking of ourselves as like the prototypes, the prototype builders and testers for like society-wide tools. And it's so easy to do that with websites. You just put it online and anyone in the world can get on. Like it's one of the fastest ways to get things into the commons that we have today. So bless the internet for that. And that covers all of our like currently operating circles. We do have the collaboration circle as well, which is kind of like it's been called the skin of MoSo, where right now it hasn't been meeting, but the idea behind it, which we'll probably pick up at some point, especially when we do cohere more large scale action, is to let people who are not part of MoSo engage in the discussion about how we build a Moneyless Society, like lowercase letters, not the MPO, but how we build that world. And the idea was there would be like different missions that different groups would be able to tackle, and we can kind of figure out where they come together and like how we can synergize and help each other out. And then how Moneyless Society can help like smaller endeavors or even amplify very effective ones to really build an ecosystem, and be ecological about our activism.
Yeah. A couple of things that you mentioned there made me think. So, like, you were saying how some of the circles are like built but not super active, and some of them do have like a little bit of activity, but they're still deciding the direction. And I think something to understand about this whole process is that like that it is a blueprint. Like Lavra was saying with the websites, something that Amanda often says is the goal is replicability and scalability, and that is kind of what we're doing here. Is like building a blueprint or a prototype, like Lavra was saying, of like ways that you can start to transition, ways that we can start to transition as a society more generally. It's very experimental, but it's also, it gives you something to build into rather than just kind of like following whims or doing whatever happens this week or next week. It's like knowing what areas are important to build on and planning to kind of get there gradually together. And I think that, I don't remember if it was Nathan or Lavra saying that it's a slow process. And that's kind of what we want to do with these episodes is like start these like kind of internal episodes is to start to introduce people to the theory of change that we're talking about and implementing here. Is like, it is a slow process, and kind of journaling it almost in this way allows other people to like follow those footsteps and experiment in their own ways and see that these things can work and can be done with enough like commitment and vision and people that are, wanting to come into it, not even just willing.
I can't help but go back to what you were saying, Lavra, and point out an observation I made, which was when we asked you to talk about the general circle, you ended up getting into how it is connected to the whole picture, the overview. Being systemic minded, it's kind of like that movie. You brought it up recently, Ev. They Live, is it called?
Oh, yeah. They live with Roddy Piper.
See, you can't unsee it. And it's hard to be symptomatic minded after that. But so all that to say, I'm glad that you went through and you named all of those circles, because not only does it exemplify a systemic mentality, but it also was a good way of just, further emphasizing what all it is we're doing here. And maybe you said it and I didn't hear you, but systemic circle. That's one that comes to mind for me, systemic support group.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a hand in creating it, but it's one of the spaces I'm most proud of to say our community has this to offer to you. When people come on board, and the first thing we're usually met with when people on board is like an exhale of relief. They're just like, oh, or somewhere I can settle in and not be on defense constantly, and just like recharge and just be around people who aren't out to get me, more or less, who aren't, just trying to get something out of me and, et al ad nauseum. And so being able to right up front say to someone in that capacity, we actually have a space you might be interested in joining. A lot of people are like, benefiting from it on many levels. It's our systemic support group. That's arguably, if not actually, another one of those direct actions and tangible impacts that we're making here at MoSo is by the structure we're operating within, and through this exploration of how to build this culture per se. We're creating what is truly a safe space insofar as people who are traumatized can interact safely. I've never been a part of anything like it until now, and I'm sure that everyone else in that space would agree.
Yeah, that has definitely been the most active and fastest growing space of anywhere in MoSo. People love that. And it's a place where you get connection you haven't had elsewhere for sure. And I know it's just one part of like what we want people to find here overall. And I think that that might be a good place to transition into, a little bit of that grand vision that we've been talking about. So, this is sort of the second conversation. We had one conversation at our retreat in Kentucky about like, what we want MoSo to be. But I wonder if, you guys would all want to give a little bit of your idea of the vision of maybe specifically within like what sociocracy allows, like what kind of environment and organization do you envision MoSo being years from now? It's only a few years old right now, and we've come this far. What do you see down the line for this group and this like style of building community?
I guess what I see down the line is a lot more in-person actualizing of these values, of these principles, of these practices. Now, don't get me wrong. I love the way that we work. I love this community, and I love the fact that we've been able to make it work, being shotgunned across the entire country in the world. But actually going and meeting up with everybody in person, in the flesh, in Kentucky was absolutely pivotal for me. And it made me realize that a lot of the things that we are configuring and planning and putting together are going to be a lot easier to finesse and fine tune when we're actually in person activating our goals. And the primary goal, in my opinion, is developing that barrier-free access, right? So that we can render money obsolete. And so I think the more that we are actualizing these types of patterns and practices and systems in person, it's going to be easier to share resources. It's going to be significantly easier because we need help sharing tangible resources. Like Lavra was mentioning that the internet is a fantastic place for the commons, and it certainly is in terms of information for sure, right? But in terms of actual tangible resources, it's much more difficult. It can be heartbreaking when our mutual aid space is someone saying, hey, I need a ride, or hey, I need some food, or I need a house. And it's like, at this point, the only way that you can actually provide that remotely is through money. And so I think that the goal, and where I see us moving forward, is developing in-person, IRL land projects where people are coalescing, where they are practicing this regularly, where they are, coalescing more resources, right? They are actually getting these commons put together and in action, so that anyone can come and access those resources barrier free.
Yeah, that is definitely a dream. It's something we've been talking about a lot lately. Mm-hmm. Lavra or Amanda?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I wanted to earlier I was going to I'll circle back to what you're saying about like how we connect the big picture to the small picture. So one way to look at it is that there is like we're all like at MoSo taking this approach. And one of the reasons why we're slow to develop is because, we are trying to think like, does this thing that we might do, does it actually help like build this world, or does it get in the way? And there's a lot of ways that like an action can impede or accelerate your progress. And the ways, are manifold. They're sociological, they're technical, they're practical. And by like having it so distributed, what we get is like this crowd intelligence, almost like a crowd quantum computer, which is collapsing the waveform of like, what's possible, what could we make impossible by like doing the wrong thing, So we're trying to keep in mind like all of the ways that our actions can ripple out and influence the world, and trying to correlate those so that like ultimately what will happen naturally, what will organically happen, is that these will converge into a harmonious system. So, when we talk about like, well, okay, how should we structure this aspect of doing operations? Like, how should we like define the role? What are the responsibilities? Like, we're not just thinking, okay, how can we get someone like off of some job application site or like a volunteer recruiting site? Like, how can we just get someone and put them in the role? Like, we're not like thinking like fishing. We're not thinking like we're trying to acquire an asset, but we're thinking, so if people are in this role over like generations, like what happens? What power structures manifest? What workflows are going to become more natural and like take over the other ones? What are going to be the like invasive species of our actions, you know. So that's kind of one way that I look at it.
Yeah, having to be very, very intentional, because those things will sneak in, especially because of what we bring to it, right? What our experience has been so far and what we have been taught that works. And so, like, I think for a lot of us, it has been a process to, like, kill the dictator in your head, kill the manager in your head, kill the cop in your head, you know, because it's just like, oh, well, we do it this way at work. It's like, okay, but is that good? Or is that just what we're told to do, you know? So that's a really good point.
I love the economy.
Yeah, and there's just so many, like, there's so many things that are just ingrained into our operations, like you said. Like, we live and breathe hierarchy, but how do you, like, just observe hierarchy in things that are not, like, relation? You know, how do you observe hierarchy where you wouldn't expect to see it? So, like, in the attitudes and habits, you know, it has an impact. And what we're trying to do, like, through, you know, which circles we have and what they're doing, is always like, how do we create an environment where what will thrive is this, like, egalitarian society where there's direct access to things. So, you know, that's, again, like, part of why things are the way they are and why we work this way. We're always, like, just trying to, you know, feel out the different ways that this is compatible with hypothetical systems in the future. And that kind of natural logic, that, like, you could call it historical materialism, is something that was very big to leftist, you know, economists, and, like, Karl Marx especially, who really created the idea of using historical materialism for discussing economies. That all, there is, like, this inherent logic to it. You know, people often think very, like, situationally, where it's, okay, well, how do we solve this problem? That's not what we're asking. We're asking, how do we solve every problem better? You know,
That's beautiful.
like, how do we
and that's, again, the systemic, you know, frame of mind, you know, not being as symptomatic. I sometimes wonder, though, to pontificate for just a moment, just be a little teeny weeny bit philosophical, because you were talking about, you know, what if the thing we're choosing to do isn't what's going to help, and how long will we need to observe that before it becomes evident, pretty much. And sometimes in this, what seems like a very steep uphill battle to approach systemic issues for what they are, it almost seems like, because of the symptomatic nature of our lives, and to a great degree, like how we recognize things and how we like approach things day to day, like you said, situational, it makes one question from time to time: is the systemic approach going to be effective? Do we need to break things down into symptoms, or is there going to be one thing that creates a domino effect? Like, so much exploration to do there, but don't get defeated, because we're doing something and it is making an impact. And if nothing else, at the end of the day, at the end of our this decade, or our lives, or whatever point you want to look at on the spectrum, we have at least not been so involved in the destructive forces, you know. I have to say, I fall in between Nathan and Lavra here with, you know, vision for the future in MoSo and what we want to achieve and all that jazz. And I love so much the contrast that was conveyed between their two responses, because we've got Nathan over here talking about the IRL activity that needs to happen on that end of the spectrum in order to bring things to fruition materially. And then we have Lavra over here on the other end of the spectrum, arguably talking about how, you know, being in the weeds and the trenches of figuring out all of those little pontification points, if you will, all these little nuances and caveats, and experimenting, and kind of just like doing this huge social science experiment. And so I like having my foot on both sides of that line. And that definitely has its pros and cons. But I must say, I too have been leaning very much toward the IRL activity. And that serving as a way to help us have spaces in which we can interface, like in real time, with each other to do things, to work things out, such as Lavra was speaking to. So the term we've been using amongst ourselves in our conversations is living lab. That was delivered to me by one of our other comrades and colleagues, Janique. And I love the term because it really speaks to the fact that once we can get some land under our belt and what others would call maybe like a hippie commune or intentional community, but essentially like a space to ideate personally, like I was saying, I think it could only give way to even more exponential improvements and innovations, because we would then have the assets, the resources, the time, and the space to work together on these things versus trying to make this virtual environment work for us, so consistently. And obviously it does to some degree, because here we are today. But yeah, I very much want to see the land project thing happen so that we can see more of that weedy work happen, where we're like getting into the thick of it and figuring these things out, parsing all these things out. And also really quickly, and then I will turn it over to Nathan. It is important, I think, also to touch a little bit more on the whole like hippie/intentional community thing versus what we're trying to achieve, which is to have a living space and an ideation and innovative space for MoSoers and anyone in this movement, and I'm using that term loosely, to have refuge, to have respite, to have the materials in hand, the tools, again, speak to the tools, to make these things happen. And so what that makes the space is so much more than some, hippie commune or utopia as it's so derogatorily referred to. It is, as Janique said, a living lab, a place where we can come together and build these things versus just have, like smoke pot and have parties and live for free per se. Very important distinction to make, and I hope we do an episode on that really soon too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, I hope I didn't cut you off.
You had the same thought we all did.
Yeah. No, I wanted to really dive into that. The idea of the living lab, but specifically just having like more time and space practicing these ideas. That's honestly that's been the hardest part for me. One of my biggest goals for this year. I had two big goals for this year. The first one was to meet as many MoSoers in the flesh as possible. And that was achieved by going to the retreat in Kentucky, and was so worth it and exactly what I was hoping for.
Lots of hugs.
And then,
great hugs.
Lots of fantastic hugs. And the other goal was to get 2 to 3 members fully sustained by the movement so that they could put their passions to this movement full time, in a sense, so that we're no longer scraping for hours that people are usually exhausted coming from, selling their labor to some other corporation or selling their labor just trying to exist and survive. And so our hard, it's hard to still show up even though we are, and we're still effective. Like, I wholeheartedly agree with what Amanda's saying, where if we have spaces and people who are able to ideate and practice all of this full time with their full energy, because they love it and because they enjoy it and are motivated by it, the growth is going to be exponential. It's going to be exponential, especially when it becomes a liberating machine, right? One where we have the tools to create a parallel system that people can finally opt out of the dreary 9-to-5 life, when people can actually opt out and say, no, I have another thing to go to. I have another safe place to exist, and have my needs met. That's the ultimate goal. Right. And I think if we can just get one space with some awesome people in there, getting the practices going and ideating and making it all happen. Like, I really believe that that exponential growth will happen. And I think that's where I'm putting most of my focus, right? We're trying to transmute the resources or the access to resources from our current system into the new system so that we can build better access to liberate more and more people.
Yeah, I think that is probably the dream of almost every single person who comes into our orbit and gets involved here, is like having an alternative, having something else to do, a different place to go, not having to survive the grind every day. And I'm sure that's why a lot of people are listening to this show as well, is just to not only get some commiseration, but to hear some ideas about like what else is even possible. So we're definitely going to be talking about that more in coming episodes. We're still going to have lots of, external guests with like amazing insights to topics that will blow your mind and just expand it in ways that you couldn't imagine, things you didn't know existed. But, in talking to the people that are here in the organization, you can kind of see a little bit of like what we're trying to give is like our theory of change, is like our process for how do we make the steps, how do we build the stepping stones to like get somewhere else that isn't this hellscape. So
Amen to that.
So I don't know if there was anything else that you wanted to include, Amanda, or any closing thoughts that you had, or you guys either.
Oh gosh, I'm putting me on the spot. Where do I start? Like I've really gotten into the whole systemic lens since we've been on this podcast and this conversation, and it can be so hard to narrow it down. As I often check in and check out of our sociocratic meetings, I would share in suit. I am excited and grateful. That's the thing that I say in every meeting. It doesn't matter what kind of day I'm having. It doesn't matter how the meeting went. It doesn't matter where we're at on our project trajectory. I full-heartedly feel excited and grateful in every interaction and thereafter, because it is like an oasis in a desert. Moneyless Society, not to like set it forth like some kind of, heaven or, to sound all culty or whatever. But it is so incredibly recharging to be a part of these spaces, largely in part because of the people who are involved in them, like Nathan and Lavra and Ev and Janique and Tomas and Heather and Rich and Jade. And I can keep going and going. What I observe is not just a room full of people that are chattering back and forth about their ideas or their traumas or so on and so forth. I have observed and experienced being involved in life-changing and world-changing conversations and projects with the most exceptional people I've ever encountered in my life. And that's saying a lot, because I've met a lot of people and I've been down a lot of roads. And this by far is the shining example of the path that I want to be on. So I guess all that to say, thank you all for being here, Nathan, Lavra, and I'll thank Ev too, even though we're co-hosts, because Ev is killing it over in social media. And really saved the day when my life started to kind of crumble, and somebody else needed to pick up that torch and run with it, and they have. So yeah, I'll stop rambling, but all that to say, my checkout in the spirit of talking about sociocratic meetings and structure and stuff is, as always, I'm excited and grateful, and especially for you all here today.
Oh. Feeling goes both ways, friend. Nathan?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback off of exactly what Amanda's saying. I actually wear another hat in this org as like helping with like mediation protocols and stuff like that. The people circle is where my heart belongs, but a lot of my time is spent sort of like organizing the org, helping out with admin and stuff like that. But I was actually talking to a member about in a type of mediation type format. We were, sitting here discussing sort of issues, and I think we got to a point of where we were like, okay, well, so what is it? Why are you here? Why are we still here? Why is any of us still here? And it was the people. It was the fact that even though there are countless leftist organizations, there are countless organizations that focus on the planet and the well-being of the planet, none of them understand that money is a root cause, and none of them understand that that is a way that we can transition our entire society and our entire landscape. And I think that is extremely palpable and so important, because one of my primary focuses, and I failed to mention this in my introduction to myself, but I also, reached this point of Moneyless Society from my own podcast, The Kindness Rebellion, right, which was focused on building systemic and social and individual change through understanding, love, and kindness. And that was so embraced in this space that it's now impossible for me to leave, because I'm just encountering people who not only see that the entire system, the entire society needs to change, but they know that they themselves also have to change. They know that we all have to change ourselves and grow ourselves in order to see the new society that we want. And so that's why I'm here. That's why I'm committed. That's why I will fight tooth and nail to keep this community together. Because I think that when we build more and more structures, we have more organization, we get more and more people, we're going to find all sorts of conflict and friction and rubbing edges and stuff like that. And the more we build resilience and find alignment and shared values, I just know we can achieve anything. So that's why I'm here.
Amen to that.
I love that. I will just say, like, to kind of tie it into the heart of this episode's like premise, I guess, like the general circle, like what are we doing? Yes, all of that is absolutely true about like MoSo, anywhere at MoSo. But yeah, what I think is so awesome about like the general circle, and how it changes it fundamentally changes our nature as an organization. It's a central part of like not just a circle structure, but like theoretically, like it's a central part of how we do non-hierarchical collaboration, because what the general circle is just the people who it's two people from each circle. You know, in an ideal world, we don't necessarily have that every meeting, but it is like the point is you have one person, and we call it the internal coordinator. In sociocracy, it would be called leader, but the internal coordinator and the external coordinator, or the representative in vanilla sociocracy, those two coordinator positions communicate from one circle to the next. So the internal coordinator going from what does the bigger circle need to tell the subcircle, and the external coordinator does the opposite. So they go to the parent circle meetings and they say, well, these are the needs and the updates from our child circle. And what that does is it puts everyone in the general circle on equal footing to just like discuss like how this sector of Moneyless Society is going to be a part of this movement. So that circle is where we get a lot of those like mixed scale conversations where we're bringing together the big picture and the small picture, because we have to figure out things like, well, are we going to use Cholo? Are we going to use Taiga? Are we going to use Asana? Like those kind of questions like come to us to really figure out like, well, how would each of those choices influence whether we get the big picture done or not. Like that is our essential whole role, and that's why this conversation, like the whole nature of today's conversation, is very similar to a general circle meeting. It just feels like we're having one, with like a short attendance, but really we are just representing. We are communicating and advocating for the different sectors of life, the different parts of a healthy society that works. And we're trying to demo that. And honestly, we don't know how. Like, we don't know. We have no idea about a lot of things. We are not all experts. And because the core of what brought us together is like this disempowerment, what we get is a lot of like novice and amateur approaches to things that we have to collectively level up. Like it's like we're in like a sort of microcosmic version of like an anarchist school where you are self-directed learning. You could call it Montessori school. There's like different like flavors of this style of education, but we are educating ourselves. We are finding out like, well, if we want to do this, what do we need to learn? Like what skills do we need? So, how do we make good bylaws? Like that was a practical question that turned into like many questions of like, what do we need to learn about like the IRS and NPO compliance and all these things? So by having like all of these different pairs of eyes on like the prize, we can have these different perspectives, like noticing, hey, we need to be better at this. We need to be better at that. And then maybe the person who notices isn't the person who actually, figures it out. But by like having this really advanced sensory system all feeding together into like a core hive brain, we can have lots of processing power like combining into a single decision space. And then there are many people, and not the same people who see like what's wrong, but there are many people to fix all these problems, and like level themselves up. So we, as General Circle, have we're kind of like a rotating membership in theory, but we just rotate positions like what each of us are doing, and it's it's building up a culture. It's building up a really like thriving foundation, I think, where like those human connections, especially the ones that are solidified in real life meetups, like just happened in Houston recently. When the Technomancy Circle had their meeting on Friday, right after there was a Houston meetup, which a bunch of people were going to, which I didn't even know about. It was just spontaneous, but apparently we have a lot of people, and there are like a lot of newer people. So that's just naturally happening, and that's awesome to see. So I guess my closing remark will be like, for people watching this, if you are interested in like that collective processing and bringing like the complex ideas into practical steps, that's where General Circle is. Like, that's what we do. We are, if you want to connect circles, then the General Circle is for you. Like, if you want to be advocating for the interests of Moneyless Society to the circles, or vice versa, if you want to advocate for like how something fits into the overarching vision, that's what General Circle is all about. And that's why all of us talk like that today, where it's very theoretical and nitty gritty at the same time. So it's just fun. I like that style, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens when there's even more collective knowledge about like these how-to questions and practicality questions. So that we're loving. If you have like something that we don't have, just bring it.
Another lovely breakdown. Thank you for that, Lavra. I have to add to the hype when you talk about an impromptu meetup in Houston. I think it's another one of those worthy things to note for listeners and watchers out there. Let's give a little space, a little air to the fact that people are getting together across the whole map. On the common ground of a Moneyless Society vision. There's been impromptu meetings up in Massachusetts, down in Florida, now in Houston, here in Kentucky. We've got people in California, Canada, Arizona, New York, just dotted everywhere. And then also in Mexico, somewhere over in Europe. We had one in Japan for a short time. There are people tuning in and getting involved from literally everywhere. And again, from literally every skill level, if you will, as we were talking about early in the episode. So don't shy away if you feel an urge to speak up or, knock on our onboarding door or, want to share, collaborate, pitch us an idea for a direct action project, especially if you have any experience in or information on acquiring land for such things and so on and so forth. Like Lavra also touched on, there are many problems and there are many people out there that are meant to solve them, essentially. Meant to solve them, not in the like predestination sense, but like in the, that's what it takes. It takes, like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village. It takes a community to live sustainably and to live a healthy, fulfilling life. That's why we're all suffering in our hyper-individualistic silos.
Yeah, could not agree more. Yeah, I hope that all of this kind of, inspires people to, even if you're not going to get involved directly with us, to reach out to find people in your area,
yes.
Build your own collectives, find people that are trying to do that and help them, because that is the way that this changes, is that it's not just Moneyless Society scaling, it's just this idea scaling. So,
I mean, we're here to help you do that.
Right.
But if you, don't feel like Moneyless Society is like, again, we're not trying to centralize anything.
Right.
We are here to help you do exactly what Ev was talking about, get started in your own area. But if, Moneyless Society, if you don't think you're totally aligned there, or just would rather work locally, then yes, by all means, start locally. Because that's what it's kind of come down to, is hyper-local action.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you guys all for being here, sharing your perspectives and your wisdom. And I know we'll see you on upcoming episodes, because we are going to do a few of these about the individual circles as well. So we'll be talking to Lavra and maybe Jade about Technomancy. We'll be talking to Nathan and probably Amanda as well about admin. We'll do an episode about media and messaging with Marlo and myself. And just a good opportunity to learn more about what we're doing and how we're doing it so that you can take the blueprint or just the inspiration or get involved yourselves. So appreciate you guys.
Do you want to do something about all the issues we talk about here on our show? Do you want to learn more, get involved, and help us help others break out of the cycle? Step 1 is to join the growing community of rebels and kind hearts sharing their knowledge and passion. Follow Moneyless Society on our social media pages and spread the message to people who need it. When you're ready, you can get involved by reaching out and becoming a Moneyless Society volunteer. We need every skill imaginable, large or small, if we're going to resist the powers destroying our planet. And even if you don't have time to volunteer, you can help us build the dream with donations of any size. We create all of this community and content because it is our passion, but we need resources to get it done. Monthly Patreon donors receive cool perks like early access to future episodes, and visitors to our website, moneylesssociety.com, can buy MoSo shirts and other merchandise that help spread awareness. We're glad you're here, and we hope that you'll keep learning and growing with us. The goal may seem far away, but we can get there together.